There is a specific moment when someone realizes they have no power over you, and the fear that emerges in that moment is unlike any other fear. It's not the fear of punishment. It's not the fear of confrontation. It's the fear of powerlessness. Someone says something designed to hurt you, expecting a reaction, expecting to see you flinch or get defensive or get angry, and instead they see nothing. They see you remain unmoved. They see you still engaged with your own thoughts, still focused on your own things, completely unaffected by what they just said. And in that moment, something shifts. They realize that they have no power to hurt you. They realize that their disrespect lands on nothing. They realize that they cannot touch you. And that realization creates a fear, unlike the fear of consequences. So what happens inside someone when they finally understand that they have no power to affect you? And why is it that being genuinely unreachable is far more powerful than being threatening? The answer reveals something about human psychology that most people never think about because most people are too busy trying to control what others think of them. In every interaction where someone is trying to provoke you, trying to hurt you, trying to get a reaction out of you, what they're actually doing is testing whether they have power over you. They're testing whether they can affect your emotional state. They're testing whether your well-being is contingent on their behavior, and they're looking for evidence that it is. Because if your well-being is contingent on their behavior, then they have power, they have leverage, they have something they can use to manipulate you. But the person who is genuinely unbothered, who is genuinely unaffected by what other people think or say, who is genuinely fine whether or not someone respects them, has removed themselves from that matrix of power entirely. And the person trying to provoke them is suddenly powerless. They have no leverage. They cannot affect this person. And that powerlessness creates a specific kind of fear. Think about what actually happens inside someone when they realize they have no power over you. Their nervous system goes into a particular state. It's not fight or flight. It's something more like helplessness. They've tried to get a reaction and they can't. They've tried to provoke you and you're not provoked. They've tried to hurt you and you're not hurt. And the inability to affect you, the inability to get the response they were looking for, creates an anxiety. It's the anxiety of having no control. And people are far more afraid of having no control than they are of being controlled. At least if they're controlled, they understand the mechanism. At least if they're controlled, they have some predictability. But someone they cannot control, someone they cannot affect, someone they cannot predict, that's unsettling. That's scary. This is different from fear that comes from consequences. When someone is afraid of consequences, they're making a calculation. They're weighing the cost of action against the benefit. They're predicting what will happen if they cross a line. But when someone is afraid because they realize they have no power over you, they're not making a calculation. They're experiencing existential uncertainty. They don't know how you're going to respond. They don't know if you're going to respond at all. And that uncertainty is what creates the fear. Let's look at how this actually manifests in specific interactions. Someone tries to insult you in front of other people. Their intention is to make you look bad, to make you defensive, to trigger an emotional response that will make them look like they got under your skin. But you respond with complete ease. You might even laugh. You might agree with part of what they said. You might ask a clarifying question. You might acknowledge it and move on. In any case, the insult lands on nothing. It doesn't provoke you. It doesn't make you defensive. It doesn't make you look bad. Instead, it makes the person who tried to insult you look bad because they tried and it didn't work. And they realize something crucial. They have no power over you. Their words don't touch you. They cannot affect you. And the realization of that powerlessness creates a fear that prevents them from trying again. This is completely different from what happens with someone who is defensive about insults. When someone tries to insult a person who is defensive, the insult lands, the person gets upset, the person defends themselves, the person proves that the insult affected them, and the person who threw the insult learns something crucial. This person can be affected. This person can be hurt. This person has an emotional investment in what I think. And so the person who threw the insult now has leverage. They know what buttons to push. They know what will get a reaction. And so they'll push those buttons again because it works. The contrast is stark. The person who is unreachable, who cannot be affected, who is genuinely unbothered, ends up with fewer people trying to disrespect them. Not because they're threatening, but because people realize that disrespect doesn't work on them. The person who is defensive, who can be provoked, who is emotionally reactive, ends up with more people trying to disrespect them because people have learned that disrespect is an effective tool. It works, it gets a reaction, it gives people power. Now let's talk about what it actually takes to become genuinely unreachable, because this is not something you can fake. You can't just pretend not to care. People sense when you're performing indifference. The pretend version broadcasts itself in subtle ways. The person who is faking not being bothered is still paying attention to whether people think they're bothered. They're still trying to control the perception. They're still invested in the outcome. And people sense this. They sense the performance underneath the indifference. But the person who is genuinely unaffected, who has genuinely released the need for other people's respect or approval, broadcasts something entirely different. They're genuinely unbothered because they don't actually need the thing that the other person is trying to take from them. This is why trying to fake indifference usually backfires. The fake version is visible. It reads as insecurity pretending to be confidence. But actual indifference comes from having genuinely decided that what this person thinks doesn't matter. And that's far more powerful because it's real. You've actually released the attachment to their opinion. You're not just pretending to. And when people sense that release, when they sense that you've genuinely removed yourself from their sphere of influence, they experience the powerlessness I described earlier. And that powerlessness creates fear. Here's what's actually happening neurologically when someone realizes they cannot affect you. Their brain is recalibrating. They came into the interaction expecting a certain response. They've been trained over years of social interaction that certain behaviors will produce certain responses. But you're not producing the expected response. Your brain is not doing what their brain predicted it would do. And when predictions fail, the brain goes into alarm. It's a subtle alarm, but it's there. The person can't quite articulate it, but they feel unsettled. They feel like something is wrong. And that feeling of wrongness, that sense that they cannot predict or control how you'll respond, creates a specific kind of tension. This is also why people are so afraid of people they cannot read. If someone's emotions and reactions are predictable, even if they're angry or dismissive, at least there's a pattern. You can work with that. You can adjust. But someone who is genuinely unreadable, someone whose emotional state doesn't seem to depend on your behavior, someone who can respond to any provocation with the same unmoved calm, is unsettling. You don't know how to interact with them. You don't know what will get a response. You don't know what buttons to push. And that not knowing creates anxiety. Think about powerful people throughout history and in current times. The ones who seem most immune to disrespect, the ones who seem most unbothered by criticism or provocation, are often the ones who inspire fear not because they're threatening, but because people realize they cannot affect them. They've removed themselves from the game where power comes from controlling others' emotional responses. They're no longer invested in that game. And that removal, that indifference is what creates the fear. This is also why someone who has genuinely released the need for approval becomes more powerful, not less. They've given up trying to control what people think of them. They've given up trying to manage their image. They've given up the endless work of maintaining a certain perception. And in that release, they become unreachable. People realize that their opinions, their judgments, their disrespect cannot touch this person, and the realization creates fear. Now, here's something worth understanding about the difference between being feared because you'll punish disrespect and being feared because you're unreachable to disrespect. The first creates resentment often. People fear you, but also dislike you. They're waiting for their chance to get back at you. They're wary of you. But the second creates something different. People respect you even as they fear you. They realize that you're operating from a completely different level than they are. You're not playing their game. You're not invested in their game. You're unbothered. And that unbothered quality is what makes you powerful. Here's something that will seem counterintuitive. The person who most desperately wants people to respect them is the person who ends up with the least genuine respect. They're broadcasting that respect matters to them. They're broadcasting that they need it, and people sense that need. But the person who is genuinely unbothered about whether people respect them, who is genuinely fine either way, broadcasts something completely different. And that broadcast is what creates respect. Not the desperate pursuit of it, but the release of the need for it. Think about what this means for how you actually move through your social world. Every time you react defensively to disrespect, you're confirming to the person that they have power over you. You're confirming that their disrespect affects you. You're teaching them that disrespect is an effective tool. But every time you respond to disrespect with complete ease, every time you let it land on nothing, every time you refuse to give the person the reaction they're looking for, you're teaching them something different. You're teaching them that they have no power over you. You're teaching them that disrespect doesn't work. And once they learn that, once they understand that they cannot affect you, no matter what they say or do, they stop trying, not out of fear of punishment, but out of the understanding that it's pointless. This is also why some of the most powerful people seem almost gentle. They're not constantly defending themselves. They're not constantly proving their worth. They're just operating with a kind of ease that comes from not needing anything from the people around them. They don't need approval. They don't need validation. They don't need respect. They're fine on their own, and because they're fine on their own, they're unreachable. People cannot affect them, and that unreachability is what makes them powerful. So here's what should sit with you. What are you currently reacting to that shows people they have power over you? What disrespect are you defending yourself against that you could instead simply let land on nothing? And what would change if you genuinely released the need for people to respect you, not as a performance, but as an actual internal shift?